In this video, we're going to talk about things you need to consider before you go to a show, while you're at a show, and after you leave a show. Maybe it's your first show, maybe it's your 100th show. It doesn't matter. Reptile shows are so exciting. Not only are reptile shows great for someone that's just looking for a pet, they're great for people that want to just go and see animals. Not only is it like walking around your local zoo, you get to buy the animals. And who doesn't love to look at animals and buy them? Responsibly, of course. Look, reptile shows are the bomb. If they're set up right, it's pretty much heaven for me. If I was to die tomorrow, I beg Jesus to send me to a Reptile Expo in the clouds. There are so many different reptiles you can come across. You can come across so mmany different common reptiles, rare reptiles, reptiles you've never even heard of before. Whoa, stop. This is Roku, my absolutely stunning copper tremper leopard gecko. He is the father to some babies I'm going to show you in the next coming weeks. I love him so much, and he's just a cool dude that would just chill. But anyway, let's get back to the video. Reptile shows are a fantastic place. Before you go to the reptile show, there's some things you need to consider. So the first thing you need to consider is, what reptile do you want? You can't go to a reptile show and think, I'm going to buy whatever I want, because that isn't fair on the animal, and you won't have the enclosure set up ready for it when you get home. Let's just say, you've always wanted a blue-tongue skink. You're going to want the setup set up before you even bring that little boy home or little girl home. You need everything prepared. You need to do your research. And if you decide what animal you want on the day, then I don't recommend you get an animal at all, because you need to put in the research prior to even attending the show. That's why it's so important to make sure you have their enclosure ready, make sure you're full of knowledge, and ensure that you have the proper setup and you are comfortable and competent at owning that reptile. Point number 2, probably the biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone buying a reptile from a reptile show or anywhere, and that's quarantining your animal. You need to quarantine your animal, or else you are risking all of the health of all your other animals, and it's not worth it. So just go and get a quarantine set up for it. It doesn't have to be fancy, just make sure it has the necessities that it needs. And if you don't know what a quarantine setup is, a quarantine enclosure basically is an enclosure that is taken away from the rest of your reptiles and kept on its own in a separate room, so it's no chance of cross-contamination of any sort of diseases. But I do think you understand what quarantine means. Since you've been through quarantine yourself, you get the idea of what it's all about. No socialization, no mixing with anything, and staying extra hygienic and clean. If you don't own any animals, and it's your only animal, then that's great. Perfect. You could probably just put it in the enclosure and it will be fine, because there's no risk to anything else. Number 3, make sure that you can get the food that reptile requires. Make sure that you can provide a good constant source of that. Don't get a reptile that you can't get the food for, because at the end of the day, the reptile is going to suffer. Maybe, you want an egg-eating snake. Make sure you have access to quail eggs, to finch eggs, eggs that the snake is actually going to want to eat. Goes for any sort of animal. Just make sure you have some food prior to even bringing it home, so you don't have to stress about getting the food after. Make sure you have a suitable container to bring it home into. A lot of times you can go to a reptile show and they give you, put it this way, they're supposed to be in containers, and we actually got given a snake in a pillowcase. That wasn't really the best thing, but luckily we brought an extra container in the back. Also, bring some extra carrier bags, because to be honest with you, although sellers are supposed to provide them in the UK, a lot of them at the reptile show we went to didn't. So luckily we bumped into another seller that we brought a reptile off, and they handed us carrier bags for all of our animals. We're going in September. We know we're going to take extra carrier bags, and also be prepared to carry your animals for the amount of time you're there. Also be prepared, because obviously not every reptile show is going to have a canteen or something you can eat and drink. So bring some extra snacks and a few drinks. Then you're not going to feel thirsty or dehydrated and make any silly decisions. The other thing you need to know is, just because you're buying an animal in the box that it's being sold in doesn't mean that that's the animal's enclosure. People actually disagree with the whole keeping reptiles in them containers, but they got to understand that it's literally just sort of for transportation and show. It's only for 1 or maybe even 2 days that this reptile is kept in this container, and then it will go back into its real enclosure. The next thing you've got to consider before going is money. A lot of shows in the UK only accept cash. So take a lot of cash with you, because you never know what's there, and you might need to, buy something extra, and there might not be a cash machine nearby. That brings me on to the other thing that is very important, and that's, if you see something you like, buy it straight away. Because if not, what can happen is you can see an animal you like, and think, oh, I'll just come back round, and when you get back round, it will be gone. They go so fast, some reptiles do, and especially if it's something that's really sought after, it won't be there for long. If you know you really want it, then just get it. The other thing you got to think about is before you buy it, talk to the keeper, talk to the owner about everything about that individual reptile. Talk about how it's kept at home. Although you might even know the temperatures and everything else, it's always good to listen to that owner just in case, you know, they haven't been looking after it well, and then you can walk away from that animal because you know it's come from a bad home. Also, make sure that the gender of your animal is correct. A lot of people, even myself, have gone to shows and we've been sold the wrong gender animal. Now, in the UK, there aren't a lot of many specialists with reptiles, and a lot of people get genders mixed up. And if you're so unsure, then take someone for a second opinion. If the seller is sort of slouched on his chair and not interacting with you or not even talking about their animals, I wouldn't recommend buying from them. What I mean is they should be passionate about the animal they've created and about the animal they're selling to you. So they should fill you in on all the information about that reptile without even needing you to ask for it. Always check the main points of an animal's health. So that's make sure they have bright, wide open eyes, make sure they've got a good body weight, and ensure that they've come from a home where they're loved. Smell the animal. I know it sounds silly, but you can actually tell how the animal's kept, because although they're kept in clean tubs on the table, an animal, if it's kept in a bad enclosure or in a bad place, will hold its smell. So if the animal sort of stinks of poo without there being any poo there, definitely don't go to that buyer. The last but the most important thing is, don't buy an animal that you haven't got a setup for already at home. That's the worst thing you can do. A lot of people will go there and impulse buy, and then they get home and the animal hasn't even got an enclosure. Or even worse, they can't even keep that animal because they haven't researched it enough, and then they find out that this animal grows to 10 foot long, or the animal needs a certain environment that that person can't provide, and it just runs into problems, and it's only the animal that really suffers. And also make sure you've got zips on your pockets, because I don't know where a lot of people are from, but I can guarantee there's definitely a couple thieves in the crowd that will try and steal something from you. So ensure that whatever you have, it has zips, and you're carrying it in a place where you can tell where something's gone, because there will be theft. Do the Disney thing and carry the rucksacks on the front so you can see exactly what's there and what's not. And the last thing I'm going to say is just have fun. Be responsible, have fun, and just enjoy yourself. Don't be stressed. It's a busy place, and that's all I'm going to say.